Good afternoon, I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Chris Ramirez with your tropics update. Currently today is October 6th, 2024, and the current time is 1:23 in the afternoon. Definitely keep that in mind if you are watching this recording after that time, because we're seeing some developments as a rapidly intensifying storm currently in the Gulf of Mexico. So now we have Hurricane Milton that is currently churning across the Gulf of Mexico. That in turn is showing the latest scans showing that convection closer to the storm. Right now it has winds at 80 miles an hour moving east at 6 miles an hour. And so we were at 5 miles an hour just earlier this morning. Winds were at 40 miles an hour just after the midnight hour. And so now we're seeing signs of this storm rapidly intensifying as it's heading off towards the east. So looking at this storm, it's actually pretty close to South Texas, not that far away, 281 miles southeast of Brownsville, Texas. As we look at the latest track, this storm is expected to strengthen into a Category 2 hurricane by this evening. Eventually, by tomorrow, we could be looking at a Category 3 hurricane, eventually tracking off towards the northeast, making landfall to the Florida Peninsula as a major hurricane. This is going to be the second time in the past 2 weeks that Florida has been impacted by a major hurricane, and it's looking more likely that Tampa might be the area that really could get most of the blunt force impacts from this system. There's still some degree of uncertainty on how far north and south this landfall will be happening, but we are expecting to bring a swath of widespread heavy rain across Florida, even Orlando under the gun for some heavy rainfall. So we are expecting this to strengthen into a Category 3 just before landfall with winds at 120 miles an hour. As we look at the weather models are in agreement that this storm is heading off towards the east. There's a lot of weather factors involved in what's steering it towards Florida, but there's still some degree of uncertainty on how far north and south that landfall will take. But models are sort of agreeing that Tampa likely to see some of the bitter impacts from this system. Even Fort Myers under the gun for those impacts going into the next few days for this week. We are expecting a cold front to arrive across the deep south. That in turn is going to keep that system south of Louisiana and Texas, and it is going to steer it off towards Florida. It's going to be interesting to see how Milton interacts with this cold front. It might play a role at weakening, but there's also warm waters across the Gulf of Mexico. As we look at the current temperatures, we're in the upper 80s, but there's a factor that's in the central Gulf right before Florida. It's called the Gulf Loop Current. It's a ring of warm water. You have warm water coming in from the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico. It sort of spins in this area and then it shoots out towards Florida and becomes the Florida current. But in this ring of warm water, we have some of the more warmer temperatures at play. So right now those temps at 88 degrees, and you're able to see how temperatures are just slightly cooler outside this little ring of ocean currents here across the Gulf. And that in turn usually could play a role at strengthening and fueling that storm intensity just prior to landfall. So something that we're keeping an eye on in the coming days, that the ocean temperatures are fairly warm out there. And just keep in mind, it only takes a temperature of 85 degrees or higher to fuel these tropical systems. And it's likely that Milton may come in contact with this the Gulf Loop current in the coming days, and likely that could play a role at strengthening it. Looking at the rainfall for this week, looking likely that we're going to see close to 8 to 9 inches of rain. It could be exceeding that, even Orlando up to 6.5 inches of rain. So if you have any plans to go to Disney World in the coming days, just keep in mind that Orlando, even though Orlando's going to be inland a little bit in the middle of Florida, just off towards the north there, they're still going to be dealing with a huge swath of widespread rain and some possible hurricane winds out in portions of central Florida. Looking at the future track winds, we are expecting more of the stronger winds to be, of course, closer towards the center of that storm. Once it starts intensifying, we don't really see an eye yet, but once we usually see that eye form when it's a strong Cat 1, Cat 2 storm. And just keep in mind that the stronger winds are around the center of that eye, so storm surge is going to be a factor in terms of this for the Florida the western Florida coast. So Helene made landfall in the Florida Big Bend region, but what's the difference for this storm is that it's more likely to hit the more populated areas of Tampa and areas south of there. So we are expecting this to have some indirect impacts for us here across southeast Texas. So even though we're going to have mostly sunny skies, keep in mind that if you are heading to our area beaches, Galveston, Surfside Beach, Bolivar Peninsula, we're going to have a high rip current risk for all of our coastal Gulf facing beaches from today and until this storm makes landfall off the Florida coast. So usually around this time of year, the Gulf of Mexico acts like a bathtub. What happens on one region of the Gulf usually plays an effect, and you're able to see those effects with the wave coverage. So now we currently have 3 named hurricanes out in the Atlantic Basin. We have Hurricane Milton, we have Hurricane Kirk, Hurricane Leslie. Leslie's a Cat 1, Kirk is a Category 2. Kirk and Leslie are going to remain over open water, not posing a threat to the U.S. or Texas. But we are still a little bit in a busy period of hurricane season. The peak date was September 10th, but very common for us to still see that activity into the months of October, which we're currently seeing right now. So Milton is crossed off the name list for this year. Our next name will be Nadine. And so it's going to be interesting to see if we're going to deal with any more named storms for this 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. But just also keep in mind that hurricane season lasts until November 30th and begins once again on June 1st of 2025. So if you're just now joining this live stream, this is a tropics update as of 1 p.m. on October 6th, 2024. We are seeing huge developments in terms of Tropical Storm Milton, which is now Hurricane Milton in the Gulf of Mexico. It is not heading towards Texas, but still close enough for us to be concerned on what's happening because it gives us a good reminder of how hurricanes can impact us here across the Gulf Coast, especially across the Texas coast. So Milton expecting to rapidly intensify into a very powerful Category 3 hurricane as it continues its track over the Gulf and into Florida. So looking closely, we're able to see that convection currently happening. They had the hurricane hunters fly into this storm. They've been flying around the storm, and you're able to see that circulation currently ongoing. So we are now still seeing those winds at 80 miles an hour moving east at 6 miles an hour, and that's as of the 1 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Not that far away from the South Texas coast, just 281 miles away from Brownsville, but it is headed in the opposite direction to Texas as the latest forecast track has this rapidly intensifying into a Category 3 hurricane as soon as tomorrow evening. So there's going to be lots of strengthening happening in a little amount of time, and this storm is going to remain a Cat 3 as it continues its track off over the Gulf of Mexico. One thing that we have to keep an eye on is that there's a lot of fuel from where Milton is to the Florida coast. So it could be possible that we could be looking at a stronger hurricane. That's the more uncertain part that we're looking at as of now, but it is expected to make landfall somewhere along the West Florida coast, potentially impacting Fort Myers, Tampa, even south of the Big Bend region as a Category 3 hurricane, and it might emerge on the other side of Florida as a Cat 1 by Thursday morning. And so we are looking, the models are sort of in agreement, they're very in agreement, much in agreement that it is heading towards Florida, but the more uncertain part is exactly how far north and south. More likely the mid-Florida coast, but we are still seeing some disagreements on that exact landfall. So that's the one thing that's the unknown at the current moment. But we do know that the fuel is there for this to rapidly strengthen into a Cat 3 hurricane within the next possibly maybe 24 hours. So what's steering it off towards Florida, you have this cold front that's going to be arriving by Tuesday and Wednesday. That's going to keep that system south and east of Texas and Louisiana, and so that is going to send that off towards the Florida Peninsula, but you're able to see that we are dealing with some very warm water across the Gulf of Mexico, upper 80s. And like I said, we have this area that's called the Gulf Current Loop that is a ring of warm water. These are the ocean currents. You have warm water coming in from the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico, sort of spins in a circle and heads out towards the Florida current, and ultimately that makes the Gulf Stream that we see moving across the Atlantic. So that in turn, you're able to also see that there's warmer, slightly warmer waters in this little ring, and that is the area that Milton might come across, more than likely come across, and that could provide some fuel for some strengthening in the coming days as we head into this week. And lots of rain expected for Florida, up to 8 to 9 inches of rain, even Orlando 6.5 inches of rain, as those tropical storm force winds or hurricane winds likely happening around that center of that circulation moving off towards our area. So like I said, if you are going to our area beaches, yes, we're having mostly sunny conditions here across our area, but we will start seeing that high rip current risk start increasing. So pay attention to the young ones and be extra cautious if you're heading out to Galveston or our Gulf facing beaches, as we now currently have 3 named hurricanes out in the Atlantic Basin currently right now. And as always, we are definitely going to be under the gun for that hurricane potential at least until November 30th. And we are definitely going to see if we're going to have to cross off more names on that list. But important reminder of what happens during hurricane season, which lasts until November 30th. And as always, you can get the latest tropics update on khou.com and on the KHOU 11 app. I'm meteorologist Chris Ramirez with your tropics update.